Hey gang, Chris Ward here with our CPT Nugget series on 70-413. We're going to talk about setting up WDS. If we're going to implement our server infrastructure, we need to get some servers up and running, and the Windows Deployment Services is one of the ways that we can do it. Pretty basics of what we're going to be doing here today, and that is setting up WDS, Windows Deployment Services. So what do you need? We'll talk a little bit about WDS versus the virtual machine manager that you find in System Center, and then even briefly talk a little bit about a non-Microsoft option. I know not everybody is going to want to use the DHCP services that are within Microsoft environments, and that's okay. That's more an OTJ, on the job type of a thing, but it is good to know a little bit also. The neat thing about that is the different ports that you need to know about listening to or not listening to when it comes to that type of environment. So here I am over on my domain controller, DC01, in my Nugget Lab environment, and I went ahead and installed already the role for WDS. You can see it down here. And that most simply because most of you, I think, know how to add a role to your servers. You come up here to Manage, Add Roles and Features, you select WDS, it goes through the wizard, next, finish, and boom, you're ready to go. Well, not entirely. You do have to configure WDS to operate on your server. So I went ahead and opened it up here. You can see my Windows Deployment Services. It says this is DC01, nuggetlab.com servers, and we need to configure it. Okay, sounds good. Now, a couple things that we need to remember before we get this deployed. If you're integrating it with Active Directory, you either need to be a member of Active Directory, so you have to be one of the member servers, or a domain controller. If you're in standalone mode, it can be configured without having a dependency on Active Directory. Why would you do that? Well, maybe you want to operate in a workgroup environment and you don't need that dependency on Active Directory to help you out. So that's one of the ways that you can do that. So in fact, it even tells you this. When I right click on DC01, I click Configure Server, it's going to tell you this is what you need to have. Notice a couple other things. Active DHCP server, because it needs to tell it where the PXE is going to be utilized. There's an active DNS server on your network. Well, that's easy. If you got Active Directory running, you got DNS. And then, of course, an NTFS. Notice NTFS, not the RDFS. NTFS file system partition on which to store images. In our demo, we're just going to use the C drive that I have on my virtual machine that I have here in Hyper-V. Okay, so we go ahead and we click on Next. Here's where you make that choice, integrated with Active Directory or a standalone server. We'll stick with integrated with Active Directory. It's going to then add where do you want that remote installation folder. Again, this is where you could choose. If you have more, you just click Browse. In this case, I only have the C drive, so I'll go ahead and stick with that. Click Next. It says, all right, though this is on the system volume, this is not the best way to do things. No problem. Just understand you always would want to put this on a separate volume and maybe even a separate disk, maybe on a network system right there. Okay, so we go ahead. Yes, we know, we understand. Now here's the interesting thing. Because of DHCP server, because we are running DHCP on the server, and so what that means is you don't want it to listen to itself. DHCP version 6, that is going to be on UDP ports that are going to be running port 67, I do believe. That's the UDP for the actual boot for that. Now notice it also says if it's a non-DHCP server running, you need to check the first box and then manually configure DHCP option 60 for proxy DHCP. Okay, but I'll actually show you that on the DHCP where you can actually set that up. It's kind of cool. And so this will obviously do this for you automatically, as Brian Alderman likes to say. Now here's the choice that you can do. A couple of things to think about. You can define what type of client computers that the server is going to listen to and respond. So when it comes out and it says, hello, I want to get an image, do I listen to it or do I not? Well, the selection I usually choose is respond only to known client computers. Now where do you get that from? Dun, da, 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 Active Directory pre-staged devices. This is where you can go ahead and put this in, and of course it has it set up ready to go, and obviously it has basically it goes in and it creates a computer account which is then pre-authorized for that PXE response, and you obviously will need to have the MAC address of that device so that way when it comes and it responds on that network, and it'll go ahead and do that. Okay, you can also obviously respond to all client computers, known and unknown, but If it's a unknown computer, what you do is you select this and it will then drop it into the pending devices node, which you're going to see here a little bit later on once we do that. And then once you're done, approved computers will then be added to the list of pre-staged. They will then go out and respond and send the image to that particular client. So in this case, we'll go ahead and just stick with respond only to known client computers. That's typically what most people are going to do. It's going to go on out, it's going to find the appropriate files, and then download them to start up the Windows deployment services. So boom, done, and here we go. We have our WDS services running. Notice I have my happy green arrow right there. By the way, I've had this happen sometimes, just where you go ahead and you install it and it'll say, oh, I was unable to start the services. But that's okay, it'll still come up, but you'll have a little black box that says it's stopped. And then you can just right click on this, go to all tasks and just simply click start, and then it'll come up, okay? So now we can just branch out here. You can see we have our install images, we have our boot images right here that we have in place. We have our install images, any pending devices, multicast transmissions, drivers, and all of those. Now, to get the boot images, we need to obviously load this. We need to add a boot image. Now, where is the location of the Windows image file that contains the images? Now, Microsoft obviously has some default ones that they can use, and they're located in the installation DVD in the sources folder. So I go ahead and click on Browse. And here's my DVD, and here is sources. This is where it is, and notice there it is, boot.wim. So we can go ahead and select on that. Go ahead and click on open. This is going to be the source of the images to add. We click on next, and off it goes and reads the image. What do we want to call the image? We have, this is Microsoft Windows Setup x64. Okay, we'll just stick with that. This is for the 64-bit. Click next. It's going to be the image group boot images. Here's the source. Boom. Set up and ready to go. It'll take just a second. We'll pause and we'll come back when it's finished loading that image onto the hard drive here. All right, there we go. Just took a few minutes to do that, to load them up. We click on finish and see, here we go. We have our image name. It's going to be Microsoft Windows. Here's going to be our architecture and everything set up like that. Tells you it's online, ready to go. Here's what its size is, the date, and the OS version of this particular one. And this is, of course, my Windows Server 2012. Now, that's the boot image. Now, what is the boot image? Remember, that's going to include that Windows PE. So that's that pre-execution, or basically just it's that little small image that allows you then to go on out and then ask for the install images. Now, I don't have any install images. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to add an install image, or you can add an image group, which you can do. So we'll call this the server group. So server 2012. Okay, and that'll be our server 2012. We go ahead and do that. We can then go ahead and add the install image that we want for that. We click on browse, and guess what? It's right there. So we go ahead and click on open. It's going to use that one. We click next, and the same thing is going to happen. It's going to say now you have these images in place. So this is, again, my server 2012. I have my data center server standard, which is going to be, one is going to be the GUI, one's going to be the core. Okay, there we go. Server standard core, server standard with the GUI, data center core, and data center, which is great. We'll have those 4 images. You can use the default name, or you can change the names. I usually stick with the default, not a big deal. It says, all right, we're going to do this. Again, I'm going to click next. It's going to go out and then bring them from my disk down to my drive. This is going to take just a little bit longer because obviously these are the full enchiladas, the whole burrito, and you're going to have all of the operating system with that. So we'll click next, and we'll see when it finishes. And there we go. So we have the images installed, and you can see right here under our server 2012, you can group these together into different groups, and then obviously select which ones to respond to which particular invite there. So we have our server standard core, our standard, we have our server data center core, and our server data center. I could say that, data center. There we go. I'm bringing that in. Now, that's great, right? We've got our images, we got our boot, we got our install images. Don't have any pending devices yet. Well, that's because we don't have any computers coming in. And then notice, though, that if you tried to do this and you went out and said, hey, nothing's responding, well, there's something we need to still do, and that is we need to set up a multicast transmission. So we go ahead and right-click on this. We create the multicast transmissions, and we'll just say that these are going to be server, spell right, setup. We go ahead and click next, and then it's going to say, all right, what is the image group that contains the image that's going to be sent out? Sounds good. We only have the one. We don't have any others, so we do that. We click on next, and then your choices are going to be AutoCast, which basically says a client's going to come in and request the image. Now the thing is this is as someone once said, this isn't like DVR where the other clients request the same image and then it just rewinds back and starts over. Instead, you're going to join the transmission that is already started. Okay, and once that happens, then it loops back and starts at the beginning, which is fine, because that way if somebody starts it and it's going along and then another computer comes in and listens in, it's going to start at that point, it'll go all the way through, and then it will collect the necessary information when it starts up again. Now that's one way of doing it, or you can do a scheduled cast, and that starts based on one of two criteria. Notice that you can do a start when the number of clients have requested the image is, and then you put a threshold. You can say, well, 4. Once you get 4, then it'll start the multicast. So it's kind of like you're waiting in the background. It's like, dun, 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 okay, wait, come on, and boom, then it'll start once you get the appropriate number. Or you can start it at a later time. Notice this is one of those things where you can do one or the other. So if you have the 4, it will go ahead and start, or it will start at a later time. In this case, we could say, well, we want to start it on this particular date at this particular time. So if I say, oh, I'm going to do it on the 25th, okay, and then I'm going to do it at 9 o'clock at night, which is typically what you're going to want to do, because you are going to not want this taking up a lot of bandwidth. Now it is multicast, I understand that, but it's still going to be a bandwidth hog on your network. And if you're doing 20 machines all trying to listen to this multicast, it's all sending that down, right? So in this case, we'll just stick with the AutoCast. Go ahead and click on next. It's going to say, all right, you've created this multicast transmission. We click finish, and there it is. It's set up and ready to go. Now, if you want to see some of the other items that's involved with this, you can right click and click on the properties. It'll tell you this and what is set up for that as well. So just some things that you can do there. Now, by the way, if you have drivers, this is really good, because a lot of times you want to keep your drivers in one place. You have different hardware on different computers, right? Maybe you've got one server that just only has USB 2.0, and then your brand new spanking out of the box server has all 3.0. Well, slightly different driver, right? Or the king of all drivers is the graphic cards. Which type of graphic card do you have? And you might have some different machines and things like that. Well, you can set that up right here in your driver groups, which can be associated with this particular area. Okay, so that's kind of cool for what you want to do. So keep all your drivers in one place, which is what you're trying to do. There are some other things you can obviously change if you right click on this and click on the properties here. You got your general, the different types of PXE response that we talked about, your Active Directory. This literally says, how do you want to name the client? This will tell you the format, unknown clients that you have not pre-staged, okay, in the Active Directory. Also, where do you want to create the computer accounts? The same domain as the user, or same OU as the user. This is usually going to be something you might want to do, or you can choose an actual domain or an actual organizational unit that you want to do. Boot, this is the boot policy. After the network boot is initiated, what are you going to do? Are you going to require the user to press F12 to continue? Do you just always continue? Obviously, this requires user intervention. A lot of times you're not going to want to do that, so you might want to say always continue the PXE boot, and that's fine. If it's unknown clients, this is where maybe you continue the PXE boot unless the user presses the escape key, or never continue the PXE boot. Just depends on what you want to do here. What's the default image based upon the different architectures that you can have, and you just select on that, and that will bring that up. You have your clients. For unattended files, these are going to be the scripts that you're going to run. You can choose whether you want to join the domain or not after the installation. Do you want to do client logging? DHCP, we already talked a little bit about that. Multicast, this is where you can use a particular multicast address. This is where you talk to your network engineers and say, hey, is this okay? The one that I've got here, or do you have a different one? Because you might have other multicasts going on in your environment, video feeds, things like that, so you can select this. And the transfer settings, you can say keep them all at the same speed, separate them into slow, medium, fast. You can disconnect below a certain speed, because again, they're still hogging some of that bandwidth there, and you might want to do that. And here's some more advanced things. Domain controller, do you dynamically discover the valid domain controllers for WDS. This is if it wasn't on the domain controller. In this case, we are. Windows should use the following servers. You can define that. And then do not authorize this WDS server in DHCP or authorize this. And that's up to you, because that's if you're using DHCP authorization. Network, get your dynamic ports set up for that. And then, of course, a lot of people don't know this, but it uses Trivial File Transport Protocol, TFTP. So if you want to set up the block size and do some other things like that, you can choose to do that. So I'll go ahead and click Apply because I made a change to the PXE response on that. It's going to go ahead and go out and do that. But once you're done with this, you essentially have set up WDS. Now, do you use WDS for everything? Well, maybe not. Maybe one of the things you might want to do is use the VMM, which is going to be the System Center. But we'll talk about that in another nugget which deals just with VMM. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for joining me.